I have it here. All right, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Homelessness and the Assembly Public Safety Committee, a joint meeting, to order. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. We'll go ahead and start on this side with Mr. Peterson, go around table.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Forrest Dunbar.
Suzanne McGrath.
Christopher Constant.
Felix Rivera.
Fred Dyson.
Dick Trading.
And then let's go ahead have, just so we have on the record, folks in the audience quickly introduce yourselves, and then I'll go back to you two. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Tom McGrath. Ronald Lehman, Folks Stay Cautious. Benjamin Briggs.
Kimberly Miles.
Joshua Spring. Jeffrey Ike.
Mike Moore.
Brett Fraser. Aaron Cusack.
Eric Glass. Steve Ashman.
Monica Whistler. Stephanie Compton.
Jim Raper. John Rod, Parks and Recreation.
Larry Michael.
Nancy Rose.
Roxy Webb.
Debbie Kelly, ADM. Linda Chase, Take Back Our Community. Gretchen Faith, Take Back Our Community. Dion White.
Nicholas Danger.
Judith Andrew, Cable Park Community.
Best name ever.
And then if we can go back to the table and have Nancy and Dean introduce themselves for the record.
Nancy Burke, Mayor Berkowitz' office.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a pretty packed agenda. So we'll start with the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've provided a couple of updates knowing that the agenda was packed. I've provided you with an update on the work that's going forward through the mobile intervention team and some safety improvements that will be happening coming up around the Brother Francis and Beans Cafe location. And just to highlight a few of the things, the graph on the top of the chart shows that we continue to have a very nice decline in emergency response calls to Brother Francis Shelter and Beans Cafe. We know there are a few other things that are coming online in July that will continue this trend, and so I just want to say once again, it's working. The combination of pairing resources to establish some safety on the campus with skills to intervene with people who have behavioral health needs and who need a particular approach that is working, and people are settling into some new practices on the campus. I want to specifically thank the partners at the location. Beans Cafe and Catholic Social Services are fully engaging, and I feel like we are making a lot of progress. Rural Cap will become part of this partnership starting in July with housing a position that will serve as a campus liaison or a coordinator of referral services, focusing on helping people getting the right referral for housing. And so that position will be coming along. It'll be finalized hopefully in July. We're funding that position through Steve Ashman, who's in our Department of Health and Human Services, who is here in the back. Who was here? Oh, here he is. There's Steve. And so Steve and his team are helping us get the financing ready for that project. There will be a fence going into the location. We're hoping to repurpose the fencing that was used at the archives site in Midtown. There may be an issue with how tall the archives fence was. We may not be able to use it in that location. Robin Ward from our chief housing officer and with the real estate division is helping us sort through that. So we'll be very excited to have not only a fence coming in, but then a swing arm gate that can close the campus entirely from the evenings. So that will be, as soon as we can get the contractor online to install the fence in July, that will be coming. Other updates include, we've talked about in this committee some of the housing programs, and we have the Path to Independence. We had a work session on that this past month, and that one is coming online, as well as some rapid rehousing dollars from Providence. So we, over the course of this summer, starting in July, will have 130 housing slots or spaces that will be housing for people in apartments all across the community coming online. So we're looking forward to that movement of the system. That's what we're after. We're trying to balance the options for housing so that we can reduce the emergency services needs. That concludes that one. There's a second one that we will have more time to discuss on the agenda item with our community council partners. And that is some of the work that we're doing to focus cleanup in the camp locations. Here's a write-up on it that will take you deeper into that work. And I think I will leave that one for the discussion later on the agenda.
Okay.
The last item on my little part, unless you want me to.
Oh, sure. All right, we have a question from Mr. Trainee.
Nancy, would you take a look at the news coming out of Seattle? Their head tax was a flop. The city council didn't approve it. So the mayor there is moving 100 homeless into City Hall. Hope that's not what we're planning on doing here.
Huh.
But take a look what's happening down in Seattle. They're spending $6 to $8 million a year, and it's not working. So I don't know how much we're spending. If you can tell us what the current amount is, we're spending on homelessness, but they're spending $6 to $8 million. So take a look at Seattle, because I'd like to learn from their mistakes. I know we brought them up here, but what they're telling us here and what I'm seeing happen down there isn't the same thing.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, that is a really critical point, and it's hard for me to compare the scale of what's happening in Seattle with Anchorage, although I will do that. I will go through and look at their expenditures, and maybe I'll call on Steve Ashman, who helps us with our resources and tabulating those. However, I would like to use that as an example of where I have said I think Seattle did the wrong thing. They worked incrementally on the problem, and they said we need to expand shelter. There are some other communities who did that as well. Boston became a right to shelter location. And I think that's absolutely critical that we find emergency assistance for people. However, if you stop there and you will try to work incrementally through this issue, you will be stuck there. And you will be ever expanding that emergency part of your system if you are not maniacally focused, is what one conference presenter said, on getting the housing out for the people and making sure that people are safe and supported in housing. If you do not keep your eye on that ball, you will be always dealing with the emergency level.
Well, thank you, Nancy. If you look at what's happening in Seattle, because this came out of there today, and for the mayor to want to put 100 people in their city hall, it's not going to work here. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually had one clarifying thing. Is this going to be on the website for the committee? Okay, because as you read through here, there are some things where it says click here, etc., which looks like some additional good information. So you can look for that on the committee's website. Any other questions for Ms. Burke? All right. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the Mr. Constant, the second item on our agenda.
Wait, so just for clarification, this is the reveal of the draft strategic action plan? This is the document that is the action plan?
No. I apologize. I'm having this problem with my computer here. I'm going to grab a thumb drive and put this on that. There is, we're setting aside a few minutes to go through the action plan. Mm-hmm. What's happening with the action plan is it's making its way through the final drafting and into a simplified one-page or two-page format. Mm-hmm. And the reveal of that will be in mid-July. However, we have the component parts to go through today. Mm-hmm. And so I will go grab a thumb drive and put it on this computer that's configured properly for the screen.
Thank you.
And we can do that.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and move that back to the end. All right, so Mr. Constant, are you ready?
Terry's not here, and I haven't heard from him in the last 2 days, so it very well be that this topic may be also rolled back or postponed. I had intended to have a homeless advocate, an actual homeless person, houseless person who's organized groups of homeless people to self-advocate down in the kind of West Coast, and he did not show up today, so as is the challenge.
Okay, well, hopefully he will, and we'll have time for him at the end of our agenda. So we'll go ahead and move on to the third item in our agenda, and then circle back to the first two. So we'll go ahead and start the Chester Creek Trail Camp work by Stephanie Rhodes and Larry Michael.
Would you like to sit here? We have notes we'd like to look at.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Please.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you and to put aside this meeting for a substantial discussion about encampments. Really appreciate that. Very responsive. Let me first note that there are people in the audience who could leave work today to show their support for these issues. They've been here regularly. I want to recognize an icon, Lainey Fleischer, who I thought might be here today, but I don't see her.
She's here.
She is? Oh, hi, Lainey. I want to recognize Lainey because she worked tirelessly to bring into the city the splendid Chester Creek Trail, which is in my neighborhood. And the presentation I make today should be taken in the following spirit. Imagine for a moment how this icon of Alaska, a hiker and a biker, felt when her two daughters made her promise that she would not ride her bike alone on the trail named for her because they believe that it is now unsafe for her to do so. That's the feeling that the community feels when we come here to talk with you about encampments in our parks. My name is Stephanie Rhodes. I am a longtime Anchorage resident in the South Addition, using the Chester Creek Trail daily for the same reasons everybody else does. I'm a retired judge, started a mental health court, and very, very intimately familiar with the demographics and the people who live on the trails. I want to introduce my colleague here, Larry Michael. Larry?
I live in a bed and breakfast in South Addition. I own a bed and breakfast in East Downtown. Call me the bed and breakfast guy. Over the last 3 years, I have been a quick study on many things homeless, especially when the Housing First 325 building went in right next to my B&B, after the Downtown Hope Center went in 1 block away. Tourism, homeless, not a great match. However, we have become good neighbors. To keep up with all that I've learned, I created my own spreadsheet on 3 areas: homeless, public safety, and community development. I've talked to many helpful people from this administration. I've worked with the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, talked to several friends from APD, attended the gathering for the Homeless Strategic Action Plan. I've reviewed Engel versus the MOA. I've shared an elevator with the ACLU twice and had an informative 90-minute conversation with attorney Eric Glatt. I'm a school psychologist who has worked 35 years in Alaska, 20 years in rural and remote areas. I'm a parent of 5 children through adoption who happen to be Alaska Native, 2 with disabilities, 1 of whom has her foot in the homeless door.
We speak for ourselves, and we also speak for a growing coalition of cross-community members who have drawn a line against continuing and now widespread encroachment of encampments. You've heard much from us about encampments, and you've heard from the media as well this summer. This is because we believe we are experiencing a crisis, literally a crisis, from encampments that have overtaken our public spaces, and we have received no public acknowledgement or communication from our government as to when this crisis will be thoroughly addressed and how. And I will say I do appreciate the handout today, of which there are not enough, and we would like more of what the plan is, because our trust in government on this issue is eroded. As elected officials, that should concern you. For years, encampments have been sanctioned through lack of action with the dual justification that there is no place for them to go, and there is no money in the budget to fix the problem. Those justifications do not fly in a true health and safety crisis. and they don't fly with us. These justifications are not an excuse for having no regularized and coordinated plan for preventing and removing encampments and reintegrating campers into alternative shelters or housing. Resultantly, encampment growth and the grave health and safety risks they pose to those who live there and those who live around them now seem unmanageable. Hundreds of them now occupy our green spaces. Some of these campers are chronically or situationally homeless. Some are travelers. Some, and a rising number of these, which are truly disturbing to us, are simply using parks and trails as cover for significant criminal behaviors that they've unleashed on local residents and businesses. These folks commit subsistence thefts as well as bike chops and resales for cash, and they engage in aggressive and challenging stances when their activities are questioned. Most of all of these campers, no matter who they are drug or alcohol involved. All of the occupants, whether chronic, situational, criminals, or travelers, have biological needs. They make putrescible waste. What is that? It is defined in municipal code. It is organic waste, including human or animal parts, excrement, bodily fluids, which are capable of being decomposed by microorganisms. That is a nice way of saying that they defecate and they urinate in our parks. They vomit, they have sex, they get sick, and they pass communicable diseases. They eat and dispose of garbage which decays and attracts animals. They drink, break bottles, and leave glass shards for kids and dogs to step on. They inject drugs and abandon needles. A hell of a lot of needles. Biohazards abound in these sites. The quality of the water suffers. Victim business owners and residents suffer. Those who have abandoned our recreational areas to protect themselves and their kids against the health and safety risks on the trails suffer. Tourists who visit the city and cannot safely access the most convenient trail system to downtown suffer. People who are living in these encampments suffer. To those of you who might ask, how can we remove them? Where will they go? The answer is, and this is going to sound stern and disrespectful, and it is not meant to sound that way. The answer is that we elected you to find that answer. You just are going to hear the Homeless Action Plan, and that plan should contain the answer. The mayor, this body, you are all too good to allow deprived human beings to live in these hazardous conditions, and you are too smart to keep enabling those who assume dominion over our belongings and disfigure our public space by overlooking their patent homesteading. To those of you who ask where will the money come from to fix this, the answer is that the unassessed costs of doing nothing are costing us more than proactively allocating the money now to fix this problem. The losses are stunning. Casualty to our waterways, our businesses, our residents, and lost tourist dollars are significant and untallied. The cost of the current whack-a-mole summer cleanup plan that involves notices, cleanups, and doing it all over and over as tents crawl 50 feet down the way and reassemble is no strategic action plan whatsoever. It throws good money after bad. Not one of you has added these costs up despite the fact that you are spending this money. And you are forcing us to spend this money in losses we have no way to recoup. We speak for ourselves, and we also speak for a coalition of cross-community members, as I said, who have drawn a line against continuing and now widespread encroachment of encampments. We can't wait any longer. We will not remain silent, and we will stand by. We will not stand by as our parks are commandeered from us in greater and greater shares. It appears that you have begun some abatement efforts, and that is great, and we like the plan that was handed out today, though we haven't had a chance to look at it much. A cleanup on 3rd Avenue, though, a couple of weeks ago, that was initially successful, now has 5 tents reestablished in the same location. And we understand that there will be postings along the Chester Creek Trail and a similar abatement of camps there. All of this has been passed along to us through word of mouth. If there is a concrete plan to address encampments this summer, we ask that you transparently communicate that plan to the entire community, not just through handouts at the Assembly Committee meeting. You have a duty to make a plan for this summer. You allocated cleanup funds specifically for this purpose to assure they aren't misspent. The municipality should have a robust plan for notice, outreach, rehoming or sheltering, and abating these camps. And the plan must include return to these locations over and over to assure they are not reestablished. The community should not have to be the watchdogs on this. The municipality should proactively be looking for encampments on its park lands and removing them year-round, rather than relying on the public to complain about camps by painstakingly, and I do mean that, entering GPS coordinates on a website, only to receive a message from some mayoral staff person that says the report was received and no further information about what has been done. We ask that you establish a communication system that shows the community you are responsive. Show encampment reports and locations, when they are noticed, abatements, how long it took to do them. This is 2018. Put it online instead of making us look for clues. It's your job to do this work. It is not the Citizens REIT's job to assume the stewardship and policing of municipal lands. It is your responsibility to hold public lands and keep them safe and clean in our interest and not the other way around. For mid to longer term planning on this issue, we have engaged in several discussions with key planners that seem to indicate an acceptance on their part that the Homeless Action Plan should include an additional priority area on community health and safety that specifically creates a strategic plan and action steps to address encampments in direct relationship and coordination with the Homeless Action Plan. I will give to Nancy today here our recommendations for what should be included in that plank of that plan in a priority area planning for health and safety in our community. As I noticed at the get-go, we speak for ourselves and we also speak for a coalition of cross-community members who have drawn a line. You, though, can take effective action. You need to have the will to do the things that we have suggested. We have not come just to complain. We have presented a plan for effective action. I am handing this to you again, and this is something that was handed to each assembly member, I believe, or to the assembly at the last assembly meeting. It is literally a 12-point plan. It is reasonable, it is doable. We will hold you accountable for reading it, reviewing it, thinking about it, and taking meaningful action. With respect to our growing coalitions, there is not one in our number that lacks compassion for people who are homeless. There's not one in our number that does not want to see them housed, permanently housed, not in expanded shelters. But there is not one in our number that will further acquiesce to having our public lands appropriated away from us. These two values are both correct and righteous. As our elected government, it is your duty to assure that each of these values is vindicated through swift and meaningful action. Thank you. And I'm now going to ask Larry to continue.
Is this an appropriate time that I can ask some questions? Or would you prefer at the end? Okay, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie, I apologize for the confusion in our last public safety meeting. It was never published by me that we were going to have the homeless issue come up.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so one of our previous encounters, I suggested that because the Valley of the Moon Park is not only posted, but it has curfews, but it has small children there, that's a place we could enforce trespass and have people removed immediately and so on. I just spent a delightful time with my pals over at the ACLU, Eric and Casey. Casey is a buddy, Eric I just met. But I asked this question: for a specific location where there seems to me to be a compelling public interest, can we do this? And I understood the response from Eric is yes, because that doesn't get cross-threaded with Bill of Rights 8, cruel and unusual, because that doesn't, there's still other places those people could go. So my suggestion is that we start with that place where it's overwhelmingly a compelling public interest and safety issue, and post it, tell people 5 days or whatever, any trespassers are going to get a ticket or whatever, and nobody be allowed there. Going to be daily enforcement and clean it out. Now, when I suggested this to you sometime lately, I thought that your response to that was negative, but did I misunderstand?
I don't think I heard that particular suggestion, actually.
Okay.
I think that may have been refined since you asked a different question.
Yeah, okay, I said it better this time.
We already talked to the ACLU, but I will tell you though that the Valley of the Moon, oddly, we walk this, we check it out. Valley of the Moon actually has had cleanup, and it's looking better. The hugest camps are down along Chester Creek.
Yeah, but I'm talking about one step.
Yes.
I understand we could take, and you're cool with it. All right, secondly, and here's some confusion, and it may be my understanding, but I talked with Dahl, Chief of Police, and I said, you guys can you, when you have a legitimate contact with some of the quote homeless people, can you or would you be aggressive at finding out if they've got outstanding warrants, parole violations, and if so, take them away? And I understand from a ex-trooper friend of mine, police officer encountering a civilian for a legitimate reason has the right to say, sir, for my own safety, I'm going to search you. And that's find out if they get any weapons and so on and so forth. And then if they find illegal substance, firearms, whatever, they can arrest that person. My suggestion to Dahl and the mayor was that be aggressive about it. That's picking off some of the people around the edges. My guess is that those people will be disproportionately represented in the troublemakers, in that population. That's maybe just correlation. But what's your thought about that idea?
Well, my thoughts about who's in there right now are these. You're certainly going to have people who are going to have warrants. They may be for stupid little things. And you're probably going to have people that if you did, Terry stop searches, that you would find, small amounts of drugs. And, from my personal view, most of that is reflective of people who have behavioral health needs that are unmet. And so really what you're doing is sweeping them up for that reason, and then they're just going to go in jail, they're going to cycle around in there, and then they're going to come right back out, and they're going to figure out where to go from there. You're not really moving them into reintegration, and that's a problem. The real problem down there are the criminals who are not being investigated, and they're not being investigated. The bike chops and all of that stuff, they're not being investigated because police, it's disproportionate to their resource, and they have not been directed otherwise, because to investigate bike chops, you have to spend a lot of time figuring out where those bikes came from, and all of that kind of stuff. And then all you're going to get is, sort of a de minimis, either misdemeanor or low-level felony crime, which, isn't really going to help you much. So that's the problem. And I think that criminalizing the homeless probably is not the move. The move is you want to take your homeless action plan and you want to do your encampment abatements with much more of the MIT team.
All right. So you're giving a better answer than I wanted. But
Okay.
but,
Sorry about that.
yeah, but things are happening that will, in the longer term here, provide lots more access to treatment. And
We hope
hopefully the cops picking a guy up with outstanding warrants or controlled substance and getting him lined up to treatment. And that, as you and I know, but if it's court-ordered treatment, it's significantly more likely to happen. I appreciate that there's a kind of a clearinghouse there to get people knowledgeable of what's available. Last thing, I think it was Eric told me this morning, that state regulations say that when they release a prisoner, that he has a right to be returned to a place of arrest, transportation. And I understand that that isn't hardly working, and the Department of Corrections is not aggressive about letting the releasees know that they have that right to go home or to wherever they're arrested. They, as I understand it through Eric, is that that is available to all people being released, and if they want it, they got to fill out a form.
Well, that's only if they're arrested from another location.
That's right.
Like if they are here and they
No,
come from
it's
Dillingham.
place
they
of
also-
I said it carefully.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
place where they of the offense.
I have not understood that DOC is not honoring those or discouraging them, as a matter of fact. I don't think the DOC, I mean, they're pretty good about trying to get people back.
I got it, but as I understood it, that they're not aggressively letting people know that when a person turns in the form, they're good about doing it. But anyways, you think it's a good idea if people want to go home?
I think people should be returned to where they were arrested, whether they want to go there or not. That's where they were arrested.
That's the answer I wanted. Thank
Return to
you.
the street.
Right.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dyson. I have one more question from Mr. Constant, and then we'll move on.
Thanks. Yeah, you definitely hit on something there, that they have a right to stay where they want to stay, and it's a lot of them are opting to stay in town.
That's true.
And that's a bit of a mess. So just what's not on the agenda, which I was told that it was on the agenda, is a discussion of an ordinance that's up for vote at the next meeting, and that's discussion of the zone-based abatement. But one amendment that I was handed from Mr. Weddleton was an amendment discussing doing what Mr. Dyson was just talking about, which is creating some areas that are kind of high priority. I think the language they're calling it protected land uses around schools and around recreation centers, around playgrounds, and within a certain distance of the paved trail system that we have. And so that's a discussion we'll have in just a bit, I believe, though it's not currently on the agenda.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I apologize, the agenda is a little vague, and my thought is there's two components of what's happening here. The first is the community is asking us to include another pillar, if you will, in our homeless plan, and we can address that as we go through that piece. And then we can have the camp abatement process. I think both components are being raised by the community. So if you want to have that discussion first, then when we return to the plan, I can pick up the other thread.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Burke. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Trainee.
Nancy, you mentioned something earlier, and if you, later in the meeting, if you get back to it, you talked about the fence coming down on the Records property. Are you guys turning that into a big homeless camp, or what's going to be done to make sure homeless don't move into there now that the fence is down?
I believe, and Robin Ward would be the best person to address this question, but I believe the fence is coming down because the opposite was happening. It created an environment where there was a fenced-off location where there were a number of camps in that area. And the fence coming down, and I understand it's being targeted for development for housing.
Okay, again, what's the plan to make sure homeless camp doesn't spring up there? Because that's right in Midtown. And I'm already getting calls from constituents concerned, what are you guys going to do? The homeless move into Midtown? They're concerned. I just want to know from the administration what your plan is to make sure that doesn't become Camp City for Anchorage.
Our
get to
plan
me
is
later on,
to make
Nancy.
sure that there are camps that are not in any part of Anchorage, so it would be included in today's conversation equally, I would
And we'll
say.
get to it when we get there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Michael.
Okay. Yes, I too speak to you as a citizen of Anchorage, an organizer of the East Downtown Action Group, participant in the 3rd Avenue Radicals, a member of our new coalition to protect public spaces. As Jack Broderick, former mayor, said at one of our coalition meetings, this is democracy in action. Why all these grassroots organizations? I echo Stephanie, we are in a crisis. All heads nodded at our coalition meeting on Monday. ADN's editorial headline, Homelessness in Anchorage is approaching a crisis point. As my friend and fellow citizen has testified, encampments have overtaken our public spaces. Hundreds of encampments now occupy our green spaces. At the recent very successful brush clearing event along Chester Creek by Take Back Our Community, a young mother running with her baby stroller said, I run this trail and I witnessed 2 people shooting up. I don't feel safe. This is unacceptable. I am thankful that coordination is happening among departments to more effectively abate illegal campsites. It most definitely takes a coordinated effort. Fine-tune that effort with your Health and Social Services new director. Fine-tune that coordination to prevent camps from reestablishing. I walked the old ANMC site last night, and indeed there are 5 to 6 camps present. I'm thankful for developing volunteer protocol for cleanup following an abatement that involves training and outreach by the mobile intervention team during the 10 to 15 days following the posting. This would seem to be the critical time to match individual needs to services. And it may be the time that criminals are found out. But the more important thing is that for those who really have the need, it's that time that the mobile intervention team can identify those individuals, their needs, and match the services. So allocating more time from 4 to 7 days for the mobile intervention team would help answer the question, but where do they go? Where do they go is not an acceptable response to the need for public health and safety with our green spaces. I understand there are plans for more permanent housing to address the low, medium, and high-risk people. Pay for Success, the Widener Group, the Youth Demonstration Project that you've heard from Nancy, among others. These are all worthy, but they take time to develop. There are funding challenges, resistance to sheltering and housing. In the meantime, make sure there are options, flexing shelter beds, other temporary options. As I said earlier, it's been 3 years since I have been learning, organizing, advocating for our safe neighborhood, being a good neighbor, compassion for homeless, and quality of life, particularly in East Downtown. For a time it seemed things were better. Now along East 3rd, things are worse. Drugs have been sold along bus stops. I have emails from guests who have said they will not stay at my bed and breakfast because of the current situation. The current condition has a cost on tourism for all of downtown. People love Alaska, but they will not spend time in our city if they do not feel safe. I support the addition of the Community Public Health and Safety plank to the Homeless Action Plan. Become familiar with suggested priorities and objectives that our coalition has brought forward for consideration. That's that 12-point sheet. A calendar of abatements and cleanups will allow volunteers to more readily participate, and it will inform the public that work is being done. This is good for the MOA. Creation of a parks enforcement officer, zone posting, all these are worthy specifics, many listed in that sheet. So thank you for your time and your hard work. We want to be collaborative. We will continue to inform our community. We will continue to be part of that democratic process. It isn't always comfortable, but positive results need to happen from our collaborative efforts.
Thank you. So, Mr. Constant.
Just a moment of editorial. You know, I've spent a lot of time with these individuals, and some of you might look at Miss Rhodes and think of, well, she's got a huge background and so she's a professional here speaking, or even Larry because he has a bed and breakfast. But the fact is that there were over 15 people at a meeting on Monday night. These are all residents, neighbors, people who are directly impacted by this and who are not paid advocates, who are not here paid to be here by the city or by their nonprofit or here to find a way to raise money through litigation or any other system. And the level of expertise that's being developed among people who are just trying to survive in their community should be a benchmark to the members of this body, so you understand. Because if you go and ask the average citizen in your district, what's the homeless plan, what's going on, how are we dealing with this problem, they'll look at you blankly, right? But these people have to know because their survival depends upon it. So I want everyone to understand that that's what's developing in the downtown at this time.
And citywide.
And citywide, across the green belts especially.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for coming here and speaking to us, and thank you also for providing this list. Mr. Chair, I believe that we should respond to every item on here in some way, and I'm not sure what would be the best way to go about that, or if perhaps, Ms. Burke, I don't know if your the strategic plan you're going to walk us through has incorporated these suggestions, or this is different? Okay.
Through the chair, this is part of that addition that's being requested in the community plan, and so there needs to be a process to kind of massage it into that format and that work. I reviewed most of those items in draft, and I think that what's exciting is that we're actually very aligned in our directions that we're heading, and I mean, I think I would leave it to the committee how you want to address the points for today, but just to know that that work will continue to go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Berg. Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. I want to expend a special thanks to the both of you for your diligence, your research, and respectfully articulating your ideas in this 12-point plan. I know that this is a very emotional subject, and so for you to come here and to be as professional is very outstanding. So thank you for that. And I want to also acknowledge Mr. Constant's remark that people have become experts in this by necessity. And I definitely want to acknowledge Rogers Park and the work that they have done in becoming experts and trying to do something in their community. Before I'll get back to you, Ms. LaFrance. So, Ms. Burke, while you, because I believe soon we'll be going back to you to talk about the strategic action plan. While you are talking about that, if you can incorporate any of these items that you know we're already moving into, and then if there are items in here that aren't addressed, if at the next meeting we can go ahead and start delving into those, I think that would be appropriate. Okay, so Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was going to request something along those lines as well. If we could go through point by point and have this on the next agenda for the next meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. So we will go ahead. Do you have copies of the AO? Your AO?
I do.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to Mr. Constant presenting his ordinance, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Burke, on the strategic action plan.
And then here's the number.
Thank you.
This is actually on our agenda, though, so it's not drafted.
Right, we're just working on it. It's an S version. So it's an S version. So what's being handed out right now is a substitute version of the item that's on the agenda for discussion on Tuesday, which is an ordinance amending the section of the code regarding abatement of illegal campsites as public nuisance by adding a 15-day zone-based abatement, clarifying the appeals process. So we have been going through iterations of discussions between members who have been involved in the conversation and the attorneys to come up with a document that hopefully works to meet the needs of the community and the public health and the public safety, while at the same time respecting the rights of the individuals who are encamped in the woods. And I'll just go through a few of the changes that we have made. As a broad-based approach, we have changed and removed the word illegal in almost every place where it was to be entered into the code. Instead, substituted the word prohibited, trying to remove any stigma which comes from the term illegal or criminal. And we went back and forth with using the word prohibited or unpermitted, and unpermitted just seemed a little too difficult to work with because the section of the code it's in. So we've shifted that language to be in the code additions. The word is now prohibited. So as you go through the items, the ordinance does a few things. It affects a clarification of the appeal process. It affects a discussion and a new methodology of clearing camps and abating camps. And it also contemplates the storage of items of a certain set of individuals so that we don't run afoul of the legal suit that we have been enjoined under. So now I'm going to ask Becky to kind of help me walk through this, or Ms. Gustin, if she's here.
Certainly. To the chair, Becky Pearson, municipal attorney. As Mr. Constant set out, the ordinance does two things. It creates this new zone-based abatement process, and in the S version seeks to answer and respond to a number of concerns or questions that were raised after the original version was floated. Specifically, it adds some definition to how a zone might be defined, how many zones can be posted at any given time, and a time limit after posting in which a zone must be abated. The intent of the ordinance was to do what we've discussed here previously, was to create a zone-based strategy for abatement. It was certainly not to create a loophole whereby we could post the entire municipality as a posted zone and then abate it any time after posting, which is one of the hypotheticals raised. So these parameters that are contained in the S version are intended to address those concerns. It does provide for the storage of belongings that are introduced in the zone after the date of posting, again, to address the concern about people receiving adequate notice before deprivation of personal property. And then it clarifies the appeals process. The current code states that anyone who provides written notice that property is theirs receives an additional 10 days to abate the property. And my understanding, talking to Mr. Gates about the history of the ordinance, was that the intent of that language was really to give additional time to people who are planning to file an appeal with the Superior Court before their property was abated. And the language as drafted was essentially both overbroad and insufficient, and that it didn't give enough time for the appeal process to run. It also gave the right to remain in place for 10 additional days to anyone, not just folks who were intending to file an appeal. This language just clarifies the intent of that additional time and makes a little more clear how that process works and that it is tied to the appeal to the Superior Court. And I would note that in the S version, we dialed back, that we aligned the zone-based abatement timeline with the standard, structure by structure timeline to make it a 10-day notice period again. And the reason we got comfortable doing that is that the language is revised to require storage of belongings of individuals who enter that zone after the date of notice. So we're assuring that people are given the same rights that they would be given under the existing 10-day structure by structure notice process.
So, as you notice by the commentary and the kind of testimony of my neighbors and this ongoing conversation, this committee's been meeting for 5 years? For a long time, that these issues are intractable and very challenging, and there is no hard and fast move we can make to drive a solution. We have to be nuanced about how we do it, and this is one more nuanced approach. Now, also, you have in your hands an amendment drafted by Mr. Weddleton, who could not be here today, which I think strikes to achieve what Mr. Dyson had spoke about, which is identifying certain areas and uses of land that are heightened protection, places where children cohabitate and play, along the trail system where the public is kind of working, community centers, rec centers, churches, athletic fields. So this question has been before us before, and I'm not going to speak too much on the merits or the drawbacks of this because it's Mr. Weddleton's amendment, but for sure it is a conversation worth having. And so those are the two items before you for Tuesday.
Chairman.
Mr. Trainee.
Chris, how big of zones are we talking about?
So in the S version, there is a definition that was
Do you have
crafted.
this version here?
Yeah, it's the version that was handed out to you. Zones shall be, it's on page 4, lines 37 through 49. Zones shall be, item D, contiguous, identifiable areas with boundaries that are recognizable landmarks, clear transition areas between developed and undeveloped lands, or physical features of development such as roads, rights-of-way cleared of trees, paved trails, utility lines, private property yards or fences, or named structures. At any one time, the muni shall post no more than 10 zones to be abated. That number 10, it's interesting. We really imagine 3 areas only for abatement, but the fact is you have a 10-day window, right? And so if you clear 3 areas that might take 2 or 3 days to get cleared, you have 10 days taken up. We'd like to reserve the right to additionally post the next section of areas that can be cleared in that time, so when the 10-day clock is over, we are able to start on the new area without losing time, without having to wait 10 days in between. And so the intent of having 10 is not that we're going to be having 10 sites in abatement in any given time, like under active clearing, but the idea is that there will be up to no more than 10 places that are noticed that clearing will happen. We also added that there is a time by which essentially the posting expires. So if the muni has failed in its duty to get to that place within a certain time frame after the posting, it becomes clear that a reposting is required, because it's a bad practice to say we're going to abate and then not abate, and then on another site say you're going to abate, and those people have come to expect you're not going to abate and you do. And so we want to put a requirement on the city to have some follow through within a certain time, and I believe it was 5 business days. I have to look at what made it through the final hopper.
It's 10 days.
Is it 10 days? Okay. We had several discussions about what the proper timeline would be. But the idea is to apply some accountability to the administration, the municipality, so that we aren't just leaving people out there to wonder if we actually mean what we're saying. So,
Yes, Ms. Swinton-Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In further response to Mr. Trainey's question, the reason that the language about the zone definition is drafted the way that it is, we're trying to, again, the intent is to enable zone-based posting of things like the large camps that we're aware of on certain chunks of the Chester Creek Trail. And so it's, and so we wanted to make clear that it was not an indefinite zone, and that the parameter should be something that's relatively easily identifiable, so a person knows that we're between the trail and the, and the private property line for, whatever's adjacent, that it's a very clear, between C Street and E Street or wherever, we have a very clear parameter, but that also to not make it so specific such that the team that has to go out and do the posting is stuck trying to calculate whether or not it's an acre or an acre and a half or 300 square feet or something that specific when they're doing the posting. That acknowledging that may be somewhat untenable.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trainey. Thank you, Ms. Swinton-Pearson. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 follow-ups on that. First is, and I know you don't want to give a hard and fast rule, but what do you see as sort of the outer edge of how large these zones could be? So I'm reading your definition here: recognizable, contiguous, undeveloped, that kind of thing. So could Kincaid Park be a zone? It's recognizable, it's contiguous, it's got identifiable, recognized landmarks.
I think under the definition, I think it would be a bit of a stretch because it's not. There's sort of you'd have to cite all landmarks. So if you look on a map at where Kincaid Park goes, there's pieces of Kincaid Park that are actually managed by AWU that include a water tower. So it wouldn't actually be saying all part of dedicated parkland in Kincaid Park. I don't think quite meets this definition. I think you'd have to say between Raspberry Road and the water tower and AWU and et cetera. I also think we have some pragmatic limitations here that will drive how this is really applied. And certainly the limit on you have to show up in a debate within 10 days afterwards, and the resources we have will by necessity make clear that these are manageable zones.
Follow up to that. Sure. So perhaps I missed this step here though. So when you post a zone, are you saying that the posting itself will describe the landmarks? So we are going to abate, and it's going to be written out so people know where that zone is? Or will we internally know it, but the people who are being abated will not know it?
The language as drafted states that it will describe in detail the zone to be abated.
The posting.
And the posting.
and the signs will be within visual of each other, right? So they have to be posted around an area where from one sign you see the next, you see the next. So it has some containment to it.
Is there any limit on, sorry, can I just follow up?
Sure.
Is there any, thank you, Mr. Chairman, is there any limit on how many signs you can post? So could you post, for example, a zone that stretches, you know, a very large chunk of the Chester Creek Trail, sign to sign?
If I might, the theory is, again, like a contiguous area would be from Valley of the Moon to C Street to 16th Avenue, right? And so that would be up E, up C, 16th, and the trail. That would be a contiguous and compact area that we could get to functionally within a set of days. We could go and clear out all of those camps reasonably within a handful of days, within a timeline that's reasonable. So then,
The word you just used, compact, I think is interesting, and that's a term that's used in law when referring to redistricting, but it's not in this definition.
So, I mean, I think the straight answer to your question is there is no code-based finite limitation on the size of the zone. That's certainly an edit that could be made. the idea is to provide, again, I think the challenge is to walk the middle path between making sure that it's clear that we're not posting the whole town, but also making clear that allowing, like, proposing something that's tenable for the crew in the field to not be faced with making, again, average judgments on the fly while they're out attempting to post. So I think it'd be careful to craft something that walks that middle path is the challenge.
Can I ask second question?
Last one.
So that was the first, and those are follow-ups. On timing, so, and I apologize, I haven't read the S version now in detail, but if we post an area, we clear it out, you know, we abate the area, how long do the signs stay up afterwards, and then how long before people hypothetically could come back in before they are sort of automatically abated again?
I think that mirrors the process we currently have, which is the signs should stay up until abatement, and then I presume we take them down when we abate. That would probably be a question for Mr. Vada about how we handle notice signs that are posted when we abate an area. And then we do not have a restriction on when people can reestablish campsites. We have never had one for any type of abatement that we have, and I think we would struggle to do so given they're not finding it illegal for partners we operate within.
Thank you.
And the key function to connect to that, Mr. Chair, is the mobile intervention team and the access to services. And so where you have an abatement process happening, ideally you are targeting, and there will be some that come moving back and forth, but we robustly target the individuals for attachment to resources. And so that's the link, not the idea of we can stop them or not from coming back, because effectively there is no way.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been told that in many instances the homeless tear down the posting as soon as they see it. And so that should have no effect on the legal time amount that they have to move their stuff out of there. But for citizens walking through the area, if they don't see the posting, they will probably continue to go online and the community know that this camp is still there. But I've also been sent emails with suggestions that we turn Centennial Camp, which is in East Anchorage, into a permanent homeless camp. And some of the neighbors that live across the street from there will tell you that for the last several years it's already been a permanent homeless camp. I don't see easy answers. I know we have 12 suggestions here that might alleviate some of the problems, but my question is, do we have the personnel to implement a 12-point program like this, and how many people would that take?
That's not a question I can answer. Do we have all the researchers in the room who I think can offer some commentary on that?
Ms. Berg, is that maybe something that you can address during your presentation? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Yeah, we'll get that addressed. Mr. Trini, on the ordinance.
On the ordinance, ma'am, how do you envision notice being given? You're looking at the site, you're going to do that, but you're also going to do public notice to community councils, or what?
We envision notice being given in the same manner that it's given currently through posting, and we have to come up with a new notice form. There is a standard notice that's printed right now that meets the legal requirements of the code, so we have to come up with a zone-based abatement notice sheet, a poster that addresses the new requirements, and I envision that being posted conspicuously in a perimeter around the zone to be abated, and potentially also adjacent to any structures that are existing within the area at the time of posting as well.
Just suggesting, you might want to consider saying notice to community councils effective, because community councils want to see this happen.
Okay.
It would just be good to have a notice. Administration has sent a notice to the community council president. Well, then the community council meeting can tell them, hey, this area is being abated. Because right now the public doesn't think anything's being abated anywhere, because they see the camps there day after day.
Understood. I think that's a point of coordination we might talk about in terms of the process, whether it's something that needs to be encoded or if it's something that goes through the process of how information is shared on a broader basis about this new. There are two components to zone-based abatement. There's this ordinance, which creates a legal tool, and then there's simply a strategy shift, which I imagine Ms. Kirk is going to speak about a little bit, or potentially, or maybe we could, or could, about in terms of how our coordinated mechanisms are going to be approaching camp abatement this summer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Dyson on the ordinance.
Yeah, thank you. President Eisenhower said famously, never let your pursuit of the perfect keep you from doing the good. And getting housing, getting all the treatment in place, those are long-term things that are going to take months and years. I like this and so on, but it's going to take at least weeks to get it in place and probably months to get a lot of progress on it. My respectful suggestion is that we proceed with doing what I suggested with the Valley of the Moon thing, and I believe that we have all the authority in statute now to do that, and I believe that because there are other places, this does not get into Eighth Amendment issues, and if we take one instead of 24, I think there's less likely to challenge it. And we could literally begin on this with notification 3 days from now, this place is going to be cleared, you know, everything and cleaned up, and we'll stay that. We could be having a significant process in 2 or 3 progress in 2 or 3 weeks. And that, and it would give us a laboratory, a test event, or to learn how to do the larger thing, which I think I completely agree with.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions, one on the ordinance and one on the amendment. Though I would like to say I would like the administration to at some point respond to Mr. Dyson's suggestion with proceeding this way and what any roadblocks might be. A question on the ordinance. On page 5 under forcible entry and detainer, notice to quit, what function does that paragraph serve? And then my question on the amendment that Mr. Wedelson is putting forward, is my understanding correct that we already do have 72 hours notice that we can proceed with if we store the belongings? And what this amendment would do is remove that requirement to store the belongings. Okay.
Yes, certainly. To your first question, the forcible entry and detainer section simply provides that we can also follow standard eviction process in order to remove people from parkland. I've given some thought to that about what that looks like. It's a more complicated process, I believe a more time-consuming process, both for the person being asked to leave the park and for the municipality in taking that action. I think Mr. Gates might be able to speak to why it was in the drafted ordinance to begin with, since he was here when that was proposed, but it's the function of it, which just says that in addition to following our standard process, we could also just file a standard eviction like any landlord would do and take someone to district court. You're exactly right in terms of your characterization of the amendment. We already do have a 1-hour notice process in clearly posted areas. We have a 72-hour notice process in the store. Both of those require storage. What the amendment seeks to do is to create a process in which there is no storage. I should say, for the record, I do have legal concerns about adopting any kind of process that's that quick that does not allow for storage in light of the parameters of the Engel decision that was previously litigated.
All right. Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Constant.
Yeah, you know, this is kind of jumping back. I didn't want to interrupt again, but on the question of postings, the envisionment back on the ordinance, not the amendment, is that there will be 3 times when the team goes through and ensures that the postings are still up or reposts in the 15-day process. But I think then we move down to a 10-day process, and so I imagine then there will just be 2 postings every 5 days. And so roughly, we didn't want to tie the team to a specific exact time, but within the window there will be at least 2 postings, the initial and the secondary, so that we ensure that the signs are clear or were clearly posted at least 2 times before the abatement proceeds. So it's systematic and not just one time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Gates.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add to Mr. 20 Pearson's statement about the forcible entry and detainer provision, and that was in the ordinance in 2010. And I was the drafter at that time, so from that perspective, one purpose we included that is some land is HOB, Heritage Land Bank parcels. That's not really parkland or just rights of way, but it's partially hold. It's sort of in a proprietary capacity. Some people may be squatting on HOB parcels and claim that they have some right to do so. So if there's a factual dispute there, we can use the forcible entry detainer process as one of our options. So that was kind of the circumstance where that was mentioned. That was sort of justified including that option for some options that we have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gates. Okay. Seeing no further questions, we'll go ahead and move back to Ms. Burke on the draft strategic action plan.
Thank you. If it's all right, if we might stay on this topic, I'd like to give an update on what is happening with the process. I have Lieutenant Carson here with me, and the two directors on this work for the summer will be our Office of the Homeless Services Coordination and the CAP lead with Lieutenant Carson. We've begun working in focused areas like this. We're doing the point by point. We're following all the current codes. However, we are doing it in regions. We began with the 3rd Avenue area, and as our community members have reported, it was clean, and now camps are coming back around. And so I'd like to just introduce the rest of the team. We have John Rada, who's with us, and John, in just a minute after I finish introducing everyone, if you could just give us an update on how cleanup is going thus far this summer. We have Melina Breland and Tanya Van Den Boss, who are the core part of our mobile intervention team. If you guys could just stand real quick so the community can see. There they are. And we have a new addition, and as you can see, there is a lot of parts to this. There are a lot of people engaged, and we've heard pretty clearly from the community that more information about how we're focusing and where we're focusing, so that the information is coming out. And we are pleased to have the community more interested in what's happening and all of the work that's going on. We are going full steam. We've decided to bring on a person who can be that coordinator for parks, for the mayor's office, the health department, police, and sometimes fire. And so Rosa Salazar is with us today, and she's been with the administration previously. She understands the GIS mapping system, and so she will be able to monitor what's happening on the map with the reports. She'll be able to feed information out to all of our team members and help to do the scheduling. I would like to make a couple of points about that. The GIS mapping is the piece of this that is making the workflow work. If we did not have a coordinated way to keep track of all of the camps that were coming in, I know before we started this, Parks and Rec had a map that they used, and the police had their own organizing mechanism. And without this GIS mapping system, we would not be able to see where the high volume areas are, where the pressure points are coming in. So that piece, having Rosa on and able to interact in that tool, will allow us to be much more efficient and to communicate more efficiently with the community. The other thing about the zone, we need all of these tools. We need to be operating in a whack-a-mole is what Stephanie Rhodes called it, but in a responsive way across the community, because things come up that we have to respond to. If we just went to zones, there would be whole sections of the community that would not have their needs addressed. So we need to be able to respond in a zone mechanism or in a more responsive manner. We'll be planning our work in that manner, and we will also be planning the work of cleanup according to how much time we need for each area. So it is something that I'm going to caution all of the partners that this will take us a while to get a handle on it. We will go methodically. We will be careful about the work we're doing, because there's a number of legal processes that have to that need our full attention, and we will get information out as quickly as possible as we launch this summer. And so maybe Director Rada can give us an update on how cleanup is going and how much we've already accomplished this summer.
Thanks, Nancy, through the chair. We never quit cleaning. Some people thought we did, some people thought we And cumulatively now, since January 1st, we have 65 tons in the transfer station, which is double where we were last year at this time. We just brought on the seasonal camp crews, the cleanup crews. They started last week. They have focused initially based on Lieutenant Carson, Nancy, and others. Kind of a calendaring, if you want to call it, of high priority areas. The first is the Native Medical Center site. That was done. I think as everybody understands, we can't stop people from coming back. Larry brought it up. Chris Reed brought it up. We cleaned it out. Before we're done, there's 2 more, now there's 5 or 6. It's a recurring thing. There was a June 9th effort by Rogers Park Community Council and the Coalition. We have people who brought on 7-day-a-week coverage for what we're doing. We have a weekend supervisor who's also an arborist. Eliminating some of the questions people are talking about, what you can cut, what you shouldn't cut, things like that, so we're addressing those. We've since modified our approach, where before we had a seasonal workforce came in, block of 10, we're in the process of hiring the last 5. We're actually going to cover that out now, so we will have 6-day-a-week coverage, which will support community work service efforts versus just do our cleanup with community work service and then just rely on community work service, which you never know how many you're going to get. Today there's 1. So, starting next Monday through Saturday, each week, 6 days, there will be a minimum of 5 people, a 5-person crew, and could be upwards of 15 to 20, depending on community work service, daily, working on whatever approach we agree on, whether it's zones, individualized. And part of what Nancy spoke to is we're not going to get rid of the individual camps. There's a lot more of those than people realize. They get posted and they need attention just as well. But we'll have the resources finally that we can take a small group, go deal with a smaller area, and still focus on the zone to try to make the progress everybody anticipates and desires, and then get ready to move on to the next zone, depending on the calendars, the priority, and the locations, and things like that. So I think we're effectively moving in a direction that says we're going to be more effective and responsive, but we're not going to solve all the problems. And just keep that in mind. And we're the boots on the ground, okay? And we'll provide the information, the data. You're going to see results. You're probably going to see some pretty big numbers this year, because I can tell you the size of some of the camps is overwhelming. But we're going to tackle those. So depending on where this goes before the assembly, depending on what we agree, we're meeting at 3 o'clock this afternoon to talk about the next priorities. You'll continue to get updates on how that information gets shared to the public. We send it to the H4, how they distribute that information, and that's a decision for others to make. We're going to be the collectors and the providers in that sense, and we'll do the best we can.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thanks. Mr. Rada, just to be really clear, you said we're not going to get rid of individual camps. What you meant, I think, is we're not going to stop abating individual camps, right?
Correct.
Yeah, not that we're not going to abate individual camps anymore. And just so you know, like, the conversation has to now begin, like, how do we take on a very limited level and store the belongings of a handful of people? And I've engaged with Solid Waste Services, and we can get their cans for $50 a piece. That doesn't include staff and labor or location or anything. But what this contemplates is people who come in late, they're still going to be abated, but we don't have the right to throw away their belongings until a certain time frame has passed. And so just know that that's a conversation that we need to begin. Again, not in a broad way, in a very limited way. Only the ones who show up after the notifications have been set. So it's different.
All right. Thank you. I have one more question, then we'll get back. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Rada, one of the big problems we hear are all the propane tanks in the camps. What do you guys do with the tanks? Because they're hazardous material. You can't drop them just in the landfill. What do you do with them?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, we collect the tanks, and we have a storage unit at our south maintenance shop in a protected area. We deposit them there, and then Blue Rhino comes and picks them up and handles them for us.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Go ahead, Ms. Burke.
I would like to address, I know that a lot of the community is reaching extreme frustration with this topic as we have this council and everybody's here. But I just want to encourage the community to hold strength, and as we work through this problem, by going out and getting involved is exactly what we need from our community, that teamwork between us and the community. But make sure we follow the laws when we do it, because anytime someone steps over that bound and breaks the law, that then holds us away from spending our resources on trying to get these camps posted, get them cleaned when we're trying to investigate crimes and things like that. So if the community, I know it's frustrating, but you know, if they're thinking about doing something, they think it's on the line, feel free to reach out to me anytime. We can talk it out, but we can't have community members overstepping the bounds and creating a hazardous environment for themselves, citizens, or the homeless community. All groups have rights, and we have to balance those. So we just want to make sure that we follow the laws, and then it's going to make it much more efficient for us as we're trying to make our system more efficient, to going out there and getting these camps cleaned up to have a better Anchorage by the end of the day.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah. I suggest the administration come up with an RFP asking for the private sector or nonprofits to take up the responsibility of dealing with the seized materials. Put them in a tote, mark them with, if you know the name, and so on and so forth, under the supervision of somebody from APD or the prosecutor's office who can make sure that the chain of custody is maintained.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I agree with everything except for APD. I would suggest that the wise path is that, but under the supervision maybe of Parks or someone who is dealing with the material. But if we utilize the police, we actually do create a chain of custody where it may not be required.
Yeah, okay. All I want is meets the legal requirements.
Right. Amen.
By whoever does it.
Agreed.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Burke, time is yours, and I will probably be cutting you off short to allow just a little bit of public testimony, so apologies in advance.
I will make this short because it's just a spoiler alert. There is something coming in July. I do want to just touch back on the subject of communication around the ordinance and the other work that's happening. We've launched a web page on the mayor's on the municipality under the mayor's page. We will also be doing a blog that will provide a forum for additional information and communication with community members. And we conducted a Facebook Live session that's available if you go to the mayor's Facebook page that really talks about all of the work that's happening. And I want to just summarize, I actually would like to really applaud and be thankful that our Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness has a brand new director, and she's here with us today. And so she could stand up, Jasmine. Say hello to everybody. So this is our main community partner who is working on this community plan. This community plan has been around for a very long time. The latest revision before we bring out the strategic action plan that will be available next month came out in 2015. It came through this body for, it was received by the Assembly, and it has been the structure which we have all been working on for this work. One of the great things I think about the alignment that's happening right now is when Mayor Berkowitz started this focus, we took a look at some components that were missing, and we identified that when a safety net of homeless services is not functioning entirely for a community, the next ring of resources that are tapped in terms of responding are the police department, the fire department, emergency responders. And we recognized that that was a pressure point for the community, along with the camps and trails. And so we've been in this work now for 3 years. We've been 2 years in now, having social service coordination in the camps and improving that link out to housing, and we've seen it work. If you talk with the first responders, they're saying now, we didn't believe this would happen. Now we're seeing it. We're seeing people get housed. We're seeing it working. And so I'm thankful that this work that we're doing is broadening now to include more voices from the community. This is not everyone's sector, so there are people coming up to speed. Even people who are in parallel sectors who work in the mental health arena are not aware of what's happening in the homeless services sector. And so a broadening of this work to incorporate all of the partners who will be with us when we release this strategic action plan next month is critical. I would also just say that the state is a key member in this right now, because the resources that fuel the homeless services safety net come primarily from the state. We've talked about the fact that 3% of the budget of our shelter, our emergency shelter resources, come from municipal funds. And those funds come through federal pass-through dollars. So the municipality is not investing in this area yet. We haven't figured out the right places to invest. The state is retracting the investments that have traditionally held up this sector. Behavioral health grants are flat. They've been flat for more than 10 years. We've talked about those system pressures, and it's very hard to make these bigger policy discussions clear for community members that this is what happens when the state says we're just going to cut the budget. This is what happens when they say we're not going to fund behavioral health at the level that we need it. This is what happens when we don't keep up with the infrastructure of housing that a community needs. We're the only community that I'm aware of that's been able actually to hold it steady. If you look at this trend line, our numbers are actually not increasing. Our numbers are holding steady. This is a long time data point. We're pretty good at collecting this data point now. It is solid. We can hang our hat on the fact that at our point in time is not going up. In fact, it's beginning to turn in the right direction. I believe the fixes we're making to the system will continue to drive it in the right direction, and that the problem is that the people who are remaining, who are homeless, we can't know what their situation is, but I can tell you that when we rented up the housing projects that we worked on, 75% of them had mental health issues, substance use issues, traumatic brain injuries. These are people who have they have significant needs. And so the camps are problematic because these are people who are quite literally not able to make it out of that situation on their own. But we are holding our own, and our numbers are going in the right direction. We will continue to drive it that way, even though we understand it's hard to be in the moment right now with us. But we are making the fixes that will make a permanent change. I just want to go to, this is the unmet need, and these are actually now very solid. This came through our future success feasibility analysis. This is the adult system, this is the total system, and these are the number of units that we need in each of those high, medium, and low categories. Now the work for us to do so that we can ultimately address the problem the neighbors are telling us is that we need to move these people to housing, we need to finance it properly, and we need to ensure that those long-term resources are there for people to be successful. It's not okay for us to put people out into housing and not have the right service support systems in place. So there are 6 pillars that will be in this plan. Available right now. My computer says it's not safe to go any further than this. I'm going to stay here. This is our vision. The 6 pillars have to do with addressing housing that needs to come online, addressing the support services. I'm not going to do a good job citing them from memory. And the work to ensure that, oh, thank you. There we go. Housing and supports, community engagement and partnerships, prevention and diversion from homelessness, system infrastructure, including monitoring of data so that we know we're doing a good job, we're not just hoping things will work out okay, funding and operations, and leadership. And one of the strong commitments that we will have for this body which will probably, hopefully many of you will outlive the time frame of this administration, that we can't go backwards once this, once the energy and the commitments that are happening now cannot go out the door when this administration leaves. They have to be completely embedded in the community, and they have to be solid for the long run. I will just close by saying there are federal investments in what we're doing in Anchorage. There are eyes on our plans that are going to solve homelessness. We have 2 federal demonstration grants. We have the Youth Demonstration Project and the Adult Demonstration Project, which is our Pay for Success. I have not seen another community who's been able to attract that kind of investment by the federal government because our system is in place. We've spent 3 years putting a system in place that can now fuel the work that needs to happen. I will just close by saying that I really appreciate the struggle. I really do appreciate the conversation with the community members. And I want to also provide a challenge back to the community members who are with us right now and who I hope will be with us as we go out to implement the solutions, that the commitment to not have people in the woods needs to be the commitment to have people in housing. And this is such a challenge. When a housing project comes up, I can tell you the experience we've had with the pushback from neighbors. I have heard it from all members, this body, the community, that, well, we really don't want those housing units in our neighborhood, and we certainly don't want them in certain configurations. We want people to have choice of where they want to live in this community. We want enough options for them to have housing, and we need those voices that are strong about the impacts that are happening now to be with us in saying we need housing all across this community for people, and we need it today. And so that's where I will be turning back to my partners to ask them to stand alongside us as we go forward in implementing this plan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Burke. So we are at the end of our meeting. I just want to acknowledge that the individual who's here for the B part of our business, Mr. Terry Light, has arrived, and apologies if there was confusion about which location this meeting was going to be held. I recognize that you're only in Alaska for a limited amount of time, so I will be working with Ms. Burke and the clerk's office to schedule a meeting in the very near future before you leave so that we can hear from you, and then hopefully that will give us an opportunity to also address sooner than the meeting next month these 12 points. So with that, and my apologies for the audience for not being able to get to audience participation, this meeting is adjourned.